so here are the four types. And I'll just try to briefly summarize the differences between the four types of gray water systems. Type 1 is a very limited type of gray water system, and the Board of Health will determine whether or not we're going to even issue a permit for this. And I can't tell you right now whether that's going to happen. It'll be up to the board. Permit may be optional. It's for subsurface irrigation, seasonal use, meaning the summer of the year, maximum 60 gallons to go out, and no storage of gray water. So it's a very minimal system. That's the system that was in the draft code, the first draft code. That's all it was. Type 2, permit is required for sure. There's a soil evaluation to make sure that you get well, let me jump down to the bullet where it says between 60 and 1,000 gallons per day. We're going to put more water in this, so you got to make sure the soil can take the more water that you're putting into it. First one said 60. All right, no soil evaluation. This one has to have one because we're potentially putting more water into it. It's for seasonal use. It's for the growing season, and no storage of gray water. So type 2 is a bigger type, still for seasonal use. And still for subsurface irrigation. Type 3, this is probably the biggie, type 3. Permit is required, soil evaluation for subsurface irrigation, but for year-round use. Must soil absorption and trench standard, so it has to meet that standard. May receive hand-carried gray water into a disposal sump. This is to help to accommodate for our Amish population. If you have water in a house, you don't have piping that takes it out of the house, you have just a bucket, you can have a depository that you dump it in, and it uses and it goes out into the gray water system. The key here is it's for year-round use. This particular type can allow for a reduction in the flow rate going to the actual septic system. So if I design this gray water system to accommodate X amount of gray water, I can reduce the system. This is the first one and the only one that allows you to reduce the system size if you're using this gray water recycling method. Okay? So that's type 3. Type 4, permit required, soil evaluation, and this is the key difference on 4. Surface. Surface and subsurface irrigation. Got to have some signage. Got to have some pre-treatment to make sure what you put on the surface is not nasty. And you're allowed to have still a large volume of water. And catch again, seasonal use. So you get the difference. Some of them are very subtle differences. Number 3 is the biggie because it's going to possibly allow for a system size reduction on number 3. For the rest of them, you kind of get the gist of what they're doing there. Various degrees that it may be used. Okay. If a type 1, 2, or 4 gray water system, that's the one that doesn't accommodate for the reduction. Gray water recycling system fails or is suspected of failing, all gray water must be diverted to the approved public sewer system or STS. Guess what? You have a public sewer, you can do this. You're on a sanitary sewer, you can still do this. Why you want to, I'm not sure. You know, it accommodates for our green population, I guess. Owner must maintain complete records and ensure proper maintenance. Except for type 3 gray water systems, no reduction in the size and design of the septic system. All other sewage from the dwelling must be discharged to an approved SDS or sanitary sewer. Remember what those other things are? The toilet and the sink, kitchen sink, where food waste is produced, or urine or feces are discharged. All right, we're getting close to being done. Wow, you guys will be out of here early. So, key messages for the public. They have developed some key messages to send out there, and probably the most important part, like I previously mentioned, that people get so concerned about is that they believe that their system has to be upgraded to current standards. And that's just not the case. Unless it's a public health nuisance. So, key fact, let's modernize our 40-year-old rules to provide for choices. The goal of the draft rules is to update the current 1977 regulations, provide a wide range of sewage system choices and technologies for a safe and sustainable future in sewage treatment systems. And like I said earlier, I hope you guys have noticed throughout this document that this is going to actually reduce Stark County system costs, probably a couple $1,000s in some cases. There will be rare cases, I think, where it'll increase. For example, the sand and gravel with the LPP going on, but it should reduce some of our system costs. The preferred method in design of sewage treatment and disposal is still leach trenches with septic tanks. So they want to point that out. And I believe what you see here really is the case. And it does allow for new technologies that have areas of limited soils and the use of those new technologies, drip and spray and the like. Whether or not you disagree or agree with the content of these rules, I can tell you, like I said earlier, this was a hard process. To get that many people to at least concede, not necessarily agree, but concede that this would be an okay way to handle it, that was a huge task, a 2-year or better undertaking, and that's where we're at right now with it. In my opinion, they've tried to balance all these different scientific, political pressures, economic pressures to try to come up with this package. And they've done a pretty good job of it. There are various things, like I said earlier, that local boards of health can adopt, and they're going to provide us with a list of those things that our board should look at adopting. So we can accommodate or customize for local conditions. Unfortunately, what that means to you guys, unfortunately, is there's some counties that'll still be a little different. So when you're looking at designing and installing, you may say, well, they do that over in Stark. Well, they may have adopted some of these special pieces that the county health departments are allowed to adopt. So it allows for local flexibility, but at the same time tries to accommodate a statewide uniform way of handling this stuff. So they got about as close to that as they could get. Homeowners are, in fact, responsible for maintaining the system. The state law actually requires them. Operation permits are currently being issued, and they have been issued since 1977. If you read those permits that you get, fax records from us, it'll say installation and operation permit right at the top of it. I don't know if you ever paid attention to that. The way of handling operation permits in the day was just you got it when you installed it. Now we're required to send out operation permits to individual homeowners to make sure they're operating it correctly. Another piece that we want homeowners to know about, because this was a big piece. You know, they were frightened that they were going to be made to replace their system when it wasn't necessary. And the other thing, I don't want you on my property. That was the other issue. So this allowed for to prevent unwarranted inspections. And for example, we're handling it this way currently. That is, if a homeowner doesn't want the Board of Health on their property inspecting their system for operation, they can hire a service provider to inspect it and send a report. We already do that. Some counties don't do that. Some counties say, I'm coming out there, and so is your service provider, and it's going to cost you for me to go and they to go, and the state said, yeah, no more of that. It's going to be, if they want to hire a service provider, they can report to you what they see. However, if there in fact is a public health nuisance, a complaint filed, then we still have to investigate those things. So we still have that obligation of the law to prevent public health nuisances, but they're trying to prevent unwarranted inspections of the property for the homeowner, for the sake of cost, and for the sake of, you know, this code is a practical solution. And unless you have any questions, are there any questions I can answer about anything we've covered today?
Will it be the same for property transfers too?
What's that?
They have the choice between the health department and
They currently do.
or not?
Well, in this county they do.
In other counties, it's
Yeah,
health
you know,
department only.
Andy, that's a good question, and I'll say it this way: at the end of the answer, I won't say I don't know, but the code does. And I didn't go over this because it really doesn't affect you guys that much. Is we are number one required to maintain an operation and maintenance program with the county. We're required to. And there's certain various things we have to do.
Are all counties required to do that? Or
They're required to have a program. It does not define the depth or scope of the program. So every county has to have its own program. And one facet of that rule says, and we are allowed to maintain our current property transfer program and other types of programs we're already running. Gives us flexibility. So to answer your question, does that piece of the rule trump what you just asked?
Yeah.
Or is it the other way around? Can they provide the inspection and then that suffice? I don't know. But we are required to maintain an operation program, and we are allowed to maintain a current property transfer program. We'll have to see what rules what there.